In today's episode of Release Radar, we take a look at the AOC 27G2 27-inch frameless gaming IPS monitor at 1080p at 144 Hz. Let's get into it. This video is sponsored by me. Come follow me on Twitch and hang out while I play games live. So I bought this monitor off Amazon, and as you can tell in the video right here, it's kind of got a big hole punctured through it, and I haven't even opened it up yet. It didn't come in any other box as well. The unboxing process of the monitor was pretty simple, straightforward, easy to take apart, and the monitor itself is completely toolless to assemble. It has these feet that latch right onto the base, and then you just screw it in with a little thumb screw, and then slot the monitor on, and that's the whole assembly process. Completely toolless. I love toolless assembly for monitors. Included in the box are some miscellaneous manuals. You get the stand, the base for the stand, an HDMI cable, DisplayPort cable, and your standard 3-prong power. In terms of I/O, the monitor has 2 HDMI in, a DisplayPort, an aux, a VGA connection, and your 3-prong power. The monitor has tilt, pivot, height, swivel, and can even be adjusted into portrait mode. Now at this point, I set up the monitor, plugged it into my extra PC rocking a GTX 1660 Ti and a Ryzen 5 3600, an X570 mini ITX motherboard with 16 gigs of RAM. It's a pretty modest mid-range gaming PC, and for some reason, I could not get the monitor to go to 144 Hz. That is one of the main features that this monitor touts, to have 144 Hz capabilities, but it only goes up to 120 Hz. I restarted the PC, I'm using a DisplayPort cable, I've updated all of my drivers, and I cannot seem to get 144 Hz out of the monitor. I'm just really confused about why the monitor would not go up to 144 Hz. Now 120 and 144 honestly aren't that different. I can't tell the difference. I doubt you would be able to as well, but the monitor does tell you it should get 144. And from what I have in front of me, as somebody who's more knowledgeable than the average gaming consumer who would just buy a computer and plug it all in and use it, I build computers, I troubleshoot computers, I know my way around technology. I don't understand what the problem is. I doubt the average consumer would be able to figure out either. So maybe I just got a faulty panel, but as far as I can tell with my display, it only goes up to 120. But with all that out of the way, let's just go ahead and continue to talk about some of the other features on this monitor. So this monitor does have an on-screen crosshair, and I've talked about these kind of things in my other monitor reviews, and they're very helpful if you're playing like Call of Duty on hardcore. This one's pretty big and pretty intrusive, but you can still use it if you want. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the different display modes that this monitor offers. I was playing Doom Eternal on this monitor to just try and test out how it runs and how it feels. As I said, I was using a 1660 Ti with a 3600 and 16 gigs of RAM, and I play Doom Eternal for these monitor tests just because it's an easy game to run and it looks and sounds so good. And the monitor does not have built-in speakers, so I was using a headset, but Doom Eternal on this PC ran at about 160 to 230 FPS, about jumping within that range, and it was just freaking smooth to play. I know it's not 144 Hz, and I'm still disappointed that this monitor says that it had it, but didn't. But even at 120 Hz, if you're getting over 120 FPS, it just feels silky smooth. Now it's time to take a look at Backlight Bleed on this display. If you do not know what Backlight Bleed is, it is when you see the lights that illuminate the panel kind of bleed through when it's all dark. So you have a completely black image pulled up, and you can just see light bleed through out the panel. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up an image that's completely black, and we're going to just take a look at the Backlight Bleed. Now, disregarding the FPS counter that I have pulled up in the top left, you can see that the Backlight Bleed on this monitor is not all that great. And it is a technically budget display, so you can't imagine features like OLED technology built into a monitor at this price. So the Backlight Bleed isn't that crazy, but you also have to think about in terms of how often you see a scene that's just completely black in a game or in a movie or something like that. You hardly ever encounter an image that's completely black when watching media. So it's not that great on this display, but you probably won't see it all that often anyway. The next thing we're going to take a look at is ghosting. Now, if you don't know what ghosting is, it's when you see these little white jagged lines along when you move from pixel to pixel. I have a video up on screen right now that I will have linked below. It is a pretty good example of what bad ghosting looks like, and typically you don't want to deal with this on your monitor. Now, if you put your monitor into like overdrive mode or whatever to make it run even faster than its factory spec'd to do so, like this monitor does have its Game Boost overdrive, you might encounter worse ghosting, but I'm just going to show the ghosting at the monitor's factory default settings. So let's just go ahead and take a look at that right now. It is kind of hard to see, but there is a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean just a very minuscule amount of ghosting visible. It's really hard to notice, and I believe because this monitor is GSync and FreeSync compatible, I do have GSync enabled, I think that's helping smooth out the image quality. So ghosting on this display is really not even a problem at all. Now that we're done looking at the ghosting, let's just go ahead and brush through the menus on this monitor. We're just going to go through the OSD, which stands for on-screen display, and we're just going to talk about all the features that this monitor has baked in. Under the Luminance tab, we have our brightness, contrast, eco mode, gamma, DCR, and HDR effect. Under the extras tab, we have our input selector, off timer, DCC-CT, reset, and other miscellaneous options. Under the game tab, we have game mode, shadow control, game color, low blue mode, overdrive, G-Sync/FreeSync, and a frame counter. Under the OBD settings, we have language, timeout, DP capability, H and V position, volume, temperance, and break reminder. And lastly, we have picture boost with bright frame, red eyes, brightness, and contrast. And that is all the OSD settings. So here we are at the end of the video, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you my raw thoughts and opinions on this monitor. So I think that this screen is awesome. I do think that the bullshit that I encountered, for lack of a better term, where I could not hit 144 Hz would be a huge turnoff if I bought this as a primary display. But the story behind how I ended up with this monitor, I actually ordered the 1440p version of this monitor and was sent the wrong one. Now the 1440p version did arrive yesterday, and I will say that it's only about $60 more for a curved 2560 by 1440 version of this display. So this 1080p display MSRP is for about $209, and the 1440p MSRP is for about $259. Now I think if you're already spending $200, saving up an additional $60 is worth getting 1440p if you have a computer that can run it well. If you don't have a computer that can run it well, or you would rather just get a 1080p monitor and a new game for $60, I think that this AOC 1080p display actually looks pretty good. Now, the backlight bleed isn't that great, and as I said before, the issue with not being able to hit 144 Hz is a huge turnoff for me if I would have bought this as my daily driver, but I don't think it looks that bad, and that's coming from somebody who plays on 1440p on the regular. So 1080p does objectively just look worse than what I'm used to now, but this monitor feels smooth. I wish it would go to 144 Hz. Maybe this is just a one-off issue that just happens to be with this panel that I received, and I did receive this panel by mistake anyway. My thoughts on this monitor is if you absolutely can't save up another $60, or your computer just absolutely can't run the 1440p version, I'd say this is a great option for a 27-inch, 144 Hz, 1 millisecond response time, 1080p gaming monitor. If you can save up that extra $60, I probably will recommend to get the 1440p version because it just looks a lot better. That's my review of the AOC 27G2 27-inch frameless gaming IPS 1080p monitor. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the review of the 1440p curved version of this display in a couple days. Peace.